Hi everyone, welcome back. We're carrying on with cell biology today, looking at specialised cells. We're going to be covering what specialised cells are, the process called cell differentiation where specialised cells form, the types of specialised cells in plants and animals, and then looking at going from the smallest part of the living thing, the cells, all the way up to an organism and everything that's in between. So as always, grab some paper, grab some pens and follow along with me. As always, let's start with some key terms. We've got two today. We have specialise and differentiate. Specialised, as in specialised cell, means having special features to make you good at a particular function. So think of like being a science teacher is specialised, for example. I could not rock into your history class and teach you about the feudal system or the wars. I don't really know much about history, but I could come in and teach you about biology. So my specialised job, I have, degrees and I've learnt about teaching. Those are my special features that I have to do my job, which is teach science. So in cells, specialised just means you have certain features that help you be good at those jobs, and those features are of course those subcellular structures, those parts within the cell like mitochondria. So specialised is So this term adaptations, you might have thought from Key Stage 3 or from the ecology topic when we looked at types of adaptations, so your functional adaptations, your behavioural adaptations and your structural adaptations or physiological adaptations, depending on which revision guide you look in. So adaptations are just those special features. So it could be if you're a muscle cell, for example, your adaptations would be having tons of mitochondria, so there's lots of energy release for muscle movement. And then carrying out its function. I've used its and something here. Usually, my pet peeve is people saying it's and that, to be specific in exams. But here, I've sort of made it a bit generic, so you could insert cell here, or, adaptations aren't, and specializations not just for cells. So adaptations to allow the cell or the organism to carry out its functions, whatever those are. Okay, our second term is differentiate. Differentiate is the process where a cell changes to become specialised. So think of differentiate, difference, so it becomes different. Now we've got our key terms under our belts, let's have a look at the process of differentiation itself. Differentiation, as we said before, is just the process when a cell changes and becomes specialised. I like to think of cells a lot like Lego. So if we take our red Lego brick to represent a cell, so this cell has not become specialised yet. In a future video we'll look at stem cells, which are cells that can differentiate and become other types, but for now we'll just label this as a stem cell. There's a certain term we use for stem cells that haven't changed, and that is undifferentiated. So you've got differentiated, the bit about changing, and then you've got so not changed. When these cells, these stem cells, undergo change to become specialised, a number of things can happen to them. These changes can happen, together or separately, but usually the cell will change in some way. So you can either imagine it changes size, the other thing that can change is, or will change, is that it will start to develop these adaptations, these special features. So you'll go from what is just a generic looking skin cell to, your muscle cells, your heart, the muscle cells in your heart, which look different to the muscle cells in your skeleton, your sperm and egg cells, and your neurons. And in case you've forgotten, check the previous video. The parts inside the cell, your mitochondria, your ribosomes, are your subcellular structures. It's not just our cells that we can differentiate. Animals and plants as a whole can undergo differentiation of their cells. However, animals can do it only during very early development when we're embryos. and plants can do it their entire lives. That's why you can take a cutting, so take a small part off a plant. If I were to pull this leaf off, I'm not going to, and then replot it in another pot. In theory, a whole new plant will grow because the cells at the bottom that you put into the soil will start to develop and change into root cells. We're going to have a look at the different types of specialised cells now. There are 3 for each type of organism that you need to know. So there's 3 for animals, which is your sperm cells, your muscle cells, and your neurons, your nerve cells. And for plants, it's root hair cells, xylem, and phloem cells. So we're going to start with the animals. We're going to draw some little diagrams, put some labels on, explain what all the features do, and do the same for the plants. So here we go. First cell we're going to look at then is this one here. This is a sperm cell. The sperm has more special features than you'd probably first think. The most obvious feature that people see is the tail, because sperms look like little tadpoles. The tail is there in order to allow it to swim through the uterus and in through the oviducts to find the egg that's waiting. This bit at the top is called an acrosome, but what you need to know is that it contains a chemical, an enzyme in there that allows it to sort of burrow into or get inside that egg cell in order to fertilise it. The little red dots on the diagram are mitochondria. Sperm cells have lots of mitochondria, especially around the flagella, in order to release energy needed for swimming. And the last part is everyone's favourite, the nucleus. The thing that's special in the nucleus in the sperm is rather than having the full 46 chromosomes, it has half, 23. So when the sperm and egg fuse, that's the correct full set of chromosomes for a human being. On to our next cell now, which is this one, a neuron or a nerve cell. Neurons' functions are to relay messages, impulses throughout your body. Main features that make muscle cells different is, first of all, they're a very strange shape. They kind of look like an explosion with a weird tentacle coming out ready to suck out the brains of someone. But this weird long tentacly bit with the alien hand on the end, this is actually just a long extension of the cell membrane and cytoplasm. What this is called an axon. And that's just what we call that long part of the cell that transmits that electrical signal. On either side we've got these bumps. That's called a myelin sheath. And what that does is it insulates the axon, so it's kind of like the wire, so the axon's like the metal inside of a wire, like the copper, and then the myelin sheath is like the plastic on the outside of the wire, so it sort of traps that message in the cell so it pings really quickly from one end to the other in a fraction of a second. At the end of the axon, at the end of the cell body as we call it here, we've got these weird projections. These are called dendrites. And what those are sort of like connecting nodes. So other nerve cells will be connected or lying really close to them. And this is where the sort of little impulses pass between. So that if this bits at the end would be your synapses, and then another neuron would be connected on the end. So that's why your brain, for example, is made up of billions of neurons, and they're all interconnected through these dendrites, so the signal can get around really quickly. Our last animal cell type is muscle cells. Muscle cells are really long and elongated, and their main feature is that they are absolutely jam-packed full of mitochondria, and they need those mitochondria to release energy during respiration so the muscle can move and contract. That's animals, so let's have a look at plants. Plant specialised cells are a little trickier to remember. So this first one here, this is a root hair cell. People often, when they get told about root hair cells or read it in an exam, start thinking about, hair. It's only called hair because if you look at the actual picture of a cell, you'll see that it's got a long projection on it. This is called the root hair. It's because it makes plant roots look really furry. If you've ever looked at plants closely, you'll see that their roots are quite fluffy. It's these structures that's giving it that fluffiness to increase the surface area to allow more diffusion and osmosis active transport, which we'll look at in a future video. The other adaptation of a root hair cell is that it contains many mitochondria. Mitochondria allow more active transport to take place. These root hair cells, apart from taking in water by osmosis, they're also bringing in mineral ions, stuff like magnesium that the plant needs to be healthy, and that more often than not uses active transport. The next cell type we're going to look at is this one here. This isn't specifically a cell, it's more of a tissue, but this is called phloem. It's one of those strange words spelled with a PH, but it's not phloem, it's phloem. Say it like phloem. Phloem have some bizarre features. They have this thing called a sieve plate. But because sugars are sort of make the water thicker due to the density, they also bring some structural support to those straws. So think of it like, old McDonald's straws, the plastic ones that used to kill the environment. They would hold up better to drinking a milkshake. But if you could imagine that inside those straws were like little mesh structural supports that wouldn't make your milkshake, a milkshake straw crumble every time you try to slurp in that deliciousness. That's kind of how it works. So it's like a little structural bracket inside. The other adaptation is that they also contain a lot of mitochondria because they're moving glucose. Sometimes that needs active transport. And they're sort of arranged end to end, so it is literally like a giant straw. The other type of cell is very similar to phloem, also stacked end to end, is called xylem. Xylem are hollow cells. If you imagine sort of your bog standard plant cell, stack them end to end, then you suck out all the contents and make little holes in the bottom of each one so they're like a straw. That's xylem. So you've got these cell walls and then sort of empty space, because these cells develop and then they empty the cell's contents and die. So it's made of hollow dead cells. And you have these walls that are made of cellulose that are there for structural support. They even get a substance called lignin added to make them super duper strong. The main difference between these two types, as you'll find out when we look at translocation and transpiration, or if we're revising when you looked at translocation and transpiration, phloem carry sugar, glucose throughout the plant, and xylem transport water and minerals. People always forget the minerals. And that's our specialised cells. So make sure you get the information down and then challenge yourself to draw them from memory, or make yourself some flashcards with maybe the diagram on one side with the labels, and then on the other side what the labels are. So you could have like the sperm cell and 1, 2, 3, 4, and then when you flip it over you've got to know what those 4 bits are and what they do. Last thing we're going to look at today is how we go from having tiny little cells to being a big old organism. So we're going to look through how cells become tissues, tissues become organs, organs become organ systems, and all those organ systems become an organism just like you. So let's start with the smallest and look at cells. Cells, as I said in my last video, is a hard word to define. I mean, everyone sort of knows what a cell is, but how do you explain that to someone that's never done much science? So in cells, we call them the building blocks of life, very much like a Lego brick. As we've just seen, there's loads of different types of cells, specialised cells, and those cells don't work alone. So when different types of cells, or some of the same cells, come together, like putting my 2 Lego bits together, you get what we call a tissue. And tissues, by definition, are groups of similar cells that work together to carry out a function. Delving into some human being biology for this, there are 3 main types of tissue in your digestive system, for example. You've got muscle tissue, which is responsible for churning when your stomach growls audibly when nobody is saying anything the worst time. When it's grumbling, it's those muscle cells that are contracting and squeezing your stomach, sort of giving you a cue as to, you know, put food in me, and also to prepare the stomach acid and get those digestive juices mixed around, ready for when you get a sandwich and shovel it, wolf it down. You then have glandular tissue, which makes things like your digestive enzymes or other things like hormones. Probably cut the word substances out, sorry. And your last tissue type is epithelial tissue. Epithelial tissue is just the outer lining, so your skin is your beautiful epithelium, for example. The next step up then is an organ. Now, organs, like tissues, are just a group of similar tissues that come together to do the same function. So much like cells are groups of tissues, organs are groups of, so as tissues are groups of cells, organs are groups of tissues. And if I was to Legorise it, we've got our tissue from before, and that can come together with another type of tissue to make an organ. Going back to our human examples, your stomach, for example, has all 3 tissue types. It's got muscular tissue for contracting, it's got glandular tissue for making enzymes and stomach acid, and then you've got the epithelial tissue which holds it all together. Next one up is your organ system. So you've had your organ from before, so this could be the stomach, and that works with other organs like the small and large intestines and your pancreas, and they come together to make the system as a whole. So you can probably guess, if organs are groups of tissues and tissues are groups of cells, organ systems are going to be groups of similar organs that have the same function. And that will lastly lead us on to the organism, the whole living thing. So you take all your systems, your digestive system, your circulatory system, your nervous system, and all of those together become your whole living thing. Here's our organism. So going backwards, organisms your biggest. Organisms are just groups of organ systems, which are groups of organs, which are groups of tissues, which are groups of cells. So if you break yourself down, you are just a big bag of cells that are working together. There's a lot of peace and unity within your body to make you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it for today. So make sure you get your notes down and go back as many times as you need until you can sort of recall these facts from memory, make some flashcards, etc., as I said, and I will see you all very soon.